Every morning, the mirror tells a story you didn't sign up for. The skin doesn't bounce back the way it used to. The knees crack on the second stair, not the 20th. By 3 in the afternoon, the energy that used to carry you through a full day has already quietly clocked out. Somewhere along the way, you started calling this normal. You started calling it just getting older. Here's the part almost nobody tells you. Long before dermatologists, before collagen powders, before anti-aging clinics with valet parking, people already had a system for staying strong deep into old age. And it wasn't locked in a laboratory. It was growing in the dirt outside their front door, mixed in with the grass they mowed every Saturday. Ancient communities across the biblical world didn't have pharmacies. They had fields, footpaths, and riverbanks, and they learned, generation after generation, which of those wild plants kept a body moving well into old age. Today we're walking through 10 backyard weeds, God designed to reverse aging, and every single one of them is something you have already pulled out of a garden bed and thrown in a trash bag without a second thought. Quick question before we start. Which of these have you already yanked out of your own yard without knowing what it could actually do? Keep that in mind as we go. What's strange is how many of these exact plants show up again and again in Roman medical texts, in Chinese herbals, in the folk remedies passed down by grandmothers on continents that had no way of comparing notes with each other. That kind of agreement, arriving independently, again and again, is hard to write off as coincidence. Stick with me, because weed number 4 was eaten by Aztec warriors before battle, banned so completely by invading conquistadors that growing it became a punishable offense, and the compound inside it is now hiding in expensive wrinkle creams sold at luxury pharmacies. And weed number 1 has been alive on this planet since before the dinosaurs existed, which sounds impossible until you learn what's actually inside it. Let's find out together, starting at number 10. Weed number 10, Dandelion. The flower everyone treats like an enemy. Homeowners spend real money trying to kill this plant. Sprays, pulling tools, entire lawn care contracts built around eliminating it from the grass. And the whole time, they're ripping out one of the most nutrient-dense greens growing on the property. Dandelion leaves are loaded with vitamin A, vitamin K, and vitamin C. Exactly the nutrients your body reaches for when fighting oxidative stress. The slow cellular wear and tear researchers increasingly link to visible aging in skin and joints. For centuries, herbalists across Europe and the Middle East brewed the root into a bitter tonic meant to support liver function, since traditional medicine has long connected a healthy liver to clearer skin and steadier energy through the day. Some modern Jewish dietary guides even list dandelion greens as an acceptable bitter herb for the Passover Seder, continuing a bitter herb tradition that stretches back to Exodus, though the specific plant isn't named directly in Scripture itself. The root itself has its own history. Roasted and ground, it was used as a coffee substitute during periods when real coffee was scarce or too expensive, including during wartime rationing, and it still has a loyal following among people avoiding caffeine today. To use it, pick young leaves before the plant flowers, when the bitterness is mildest, and toss them into a salad the same way you'd use spinach or arugula. If you take blood thinners or diuretics, talk to your doctor before adding dandelion regularly, since it can amplify the effect of both. Weed number 9, cleavers, the clingy little plant with a forgotten reputation. If you've ever walked through tall grass in early summer and come out covered in tiny green burrs sticking to your socks, you've already met cleavers. Most people curse it and keep walking. It's technically called goosegrass, a name it earned because geese seek out and eat the seeds whenever they get the chance. The Greek physician Dioscorides described this plant in his 1st century medical text, one of the oldest pharmacology references in existence, and European folk healers kept using it for centuries after him for one specific reason: supporting the lymphatic system, the quiet drainage network running underneath your skin that helps clear away cellular waste. Modern clinical research on cleavers is still thin, so treat this as inherited tradition rather than settled science. What isn't in question is the plant's vitamin C content, and vitamin C happens to be the nutrient your body absolutely requires to manufacture collagen, the structural protein that keeps skin firm instead of loose and sagging. Fresh spring shoots were traditionally steeped in cold water overnight to make a mild, grassy-tasting infusion, strained and sipped the next morning. Skip this one if you're pregnant or nursing until you've checked with a physician, since traditional use during pregnancy simply isn't well documented. Weed number 8, chickweed, the soft green carpet under your feet. It grows so low and spreads so fast that most people mow straight over it without ever learning its name, let alone what it's capable of. It's also one of the very first edible plants to appear after winter, which meant it played a real role for communities coming out of a long cold season with almost no fresh greens left in storage. Chickweed carries a long folk history as a skin remedy, crushed fresh and pressed directly onto irritated patches of skin across generations of European households, long before anyone understood why it seemed to help. Early laboratory studies point to saponins and vitamin C inside the plant that may support skin comfort, though large human trials are still missing, which means this belongs in the promising tradition category, not the proven medicine one. Steep a handful of fresh chickweed in hot water for about 10 minutes to make a mild tea, or crush the leaves into a simple paste for topical use. Always test a small patch of skin first, since some people are more sensitive to it than others. Weed number 7, plantain, not the banana, the other one entirely. This is the low, ribbed leaf weed, pushing straight up through sidewalk cracks and worn dirt footpaths, tough enough to survive being stepped on every single day. Native American communities reportedly gave it a nickname that says everything about how it spread, calling it white man's footprint, because it seemed to appear wherever European settlers walked and set up new towns. Anglo-Saxon healers writing in the 9th century included it in one of the oldest surviving medical texts in the English language, calling it the mother of herbs and praising its ability to close wounds cleanly. Turns out that old instinct wasn't far off. Plantain contains a compound called allantoin, and modern skincare formulators now add allantoin to creams specifically because it's been studied for supporting skin cell renewal and soothing irritation. The same compound your ancestors were pressing onto scraped knees 1,000 years ago is sitting in a jar on a department store shelf right now, just marketed under a far fancier name. Crush a fresh leaf and press it against minor skin irritation, or steep the dried leaves as a tea, and check with a doctor first if you're currently on prescription medication. Halfway through this list, and the pattern should already be obvious. If your own yard has quietly been growing a pharmacy this entire time, tap like right now so this reaches someone else who's still paying for what's already growing free outside their window. Weed number 6, Yarrow, the plant named after a legend. Its scientific name, Achillea, comes directly from Achilles, the warrior of Greek legend said to have carried this plant onto the battlefield to treat his soldiers' wounds. Roman military physicians reportedly carried it centuries later for the exact same purpose, tucked into their field kits alongside bandages. On the completely other side of the world, dried yarrow stalks were used in ancient China for casting the hexagrams of the I Ching, a completely separate tradition that had no contact with Greek or Roman medicine, yet still singled out this same plant as something worth keeping close at hand. Inside the feathery white flower head sit flavonoids and tannins, compounds studied for their astringent, tissue-tightening properties. the same category of effect people now chase with expensive toning serums bought at the drugstore. Steep the dried flowers as a tea, or apply a cooled, strained infusion to the skin with a clean cloth. Avoid yarrow if you're pregnant or allergic to ragweed and related plants, since it shares family traits that can trigger similar reactions. Weed number 5, stinging nettle, the one that actually fights back. Everyone knows nettle for exactly one reason: it stings. Brush against the leaves with bare skin, and you'll feel it within seconds. What most people don't know is that this same painful plant was once spun into cloth. Archaeologists have recovered nettle fiber fabric from Bronze Age burial sites in Denmark, thousands of years old, proof that people were finding practical uses for this plant long before anyone wrote down why it mattered for the body too. Inside those stinging leaves is a plant absolutely loaded with silica and iron, two things your body needs constantly and rarely gets enough of through diet alone. Roman soldiers reportedly practiced something called urtication, deliberately pressing stinging nettle against sore joints in cold weather, convinced that the irritation brought warmth and relief to aching limbs on long marches. Today, researchers are studying nettle's role in joint comfort and its notably high iron content, since iron deficiency is one of the quiet drivers behind fatigue and dull, tired-looking skin. Cooking or drying the leaves completely neutralizes the sting, so steep dried nettle as a tea or add blanched leaves to soup, exactly the way you'd use spinach. If you take blood pressure medication or blood thinners, ask your doctor before regular use, since nettle has been shown to interact with both. Weed number 4, Amaranth, the forbidden grain. Here's the one teased at the very start. Amaranth, often dismissed as pigweed when it shows up uninvited in a garden bed, was once so central to Aztec religious ceremony that Spanish conquistadors banned its cultivation entirely across the empire, fearing the cultural hold it had over the population. That's not an exaggeration for effect. That's documented colonial history. The Aztecs weren't wrong to prize it so highly. Amaranth is a complete protein, meaning it contains all 9 essential amino acids, which is genuinely rare for a plant food. And that density is exactly why NASA researchers have studied amaranth as a candidate crop for long-duration space missions, where every calorie and gram of nutrition has to be justified. It also contains squalene, a natural compound your own skin produces less and less of as you age. Squalene has become such a valuable cosmetic ingredient that major skincare companies are now sourcing it from plants like amaranth and olives instead of shark liver, specifically because of its documented role in keeping skin soft and properly hydrated. The leaves cook exactly like spinach, and the tiny seeds can be popped like miniature popcorn or simmered into a warm porridge. Amaranth leaves do contain oxalates, so if you have a history of kidney stones, check with your doctor before eating them on a regular basis. Ready for something rooted in nearly every ancient tradition on Earth at once? Here's a plant that Japan puts in soup, China turns into medicine, and European grandmothers have called a blood purifier for generations. Weed number 3, burdock root. The plant with 3 completely separate reputations. In traditional Chinese medicine, burdock seeds have been used for generations under the name Niu Bongzi. In Japan, the root is an everyday grocery store vegetable called gobo, sliced into soups and stir-fries without anyone thinking twice about it. In European folk medicine, it earned the nickname blood purifier, a phrase old-world herbalists used loosely to describe anything believed to support the skin by supporting internal cleansing from within. And in a completely different corner of history, the sticky burrs of this exact plant are the reason Velcro exists at all. A Swiss engineer picked the burrs off his dog's fur in 1941, examined them under a microscope, and reverse-engineered the tiny hooks into a fastener used on everything from jackets to spacesuits. Burdock root contains inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria, and chlorogenic acid, an antioxidant compound also found in coffee that researchers have studied for its role in fighting oxidative stress at the cellular level. Peel and slice the root thin, then simmer it in broth or stir-fry it the same way you'd cook a carrot. If you're allergic to ragweed or related plants, or if you're pregnant, avoid burdock, since it belongs to the same plant family as yarrow and carries a similar caution. Weed number 2, purslane. The one growing in your sidewalk cracks right now, today, while you watch this. This is arguably the most scientifically remarkable weed on this entire list, and almost nobody knows it exists in their own yard. It's also nearly indestructible, thriving in cracked pavement and poor dry soil where almost nothing else survives, which is exactly why ancient Egyptian physicians recorded it in the Ebers Papyrus around 1550 BC, one of the oldest medical documents ever discovered. Purslane holds the highest documented concentration of alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid, of any leafy green ever tested, outperforming even fish in some direct comparisons, gram for gram. Some biblical scholars have pointed to Job chapter 6 verse 6, where the original Hebrew word has been alternately translated in certain scholarly notes as the juice of purslane, rather than the white of an egg, though this remains a genuinely debated translation rather than a settled fact, and it's worth hearing both sides before drawing your own conclusion. What isn't debated is purslane's nutrient profile. It contains vitamin E, vitamin C, glutathione, and naturally occurring melatonin, a combination researchers associate with protecting skin cells from the kind of oxidative damage that eventually shows up as fine lines and dullness. Wash the leaves and stems and toss them raw into a salad, where they add a slightly tangy, lemony crunch, or sauté them briefly the way you'd cook spinach. Purslane contains oxalates as well, so anyone with a history of kidney stones should moderate their intake and check with a doctor first. If any part of this list has genuinely surprised you, subscribe now, because we are nowhere near finished uncovering what's been hiding in plain sight across scripture and ancient tradition. There is more like this coming, and you will not want to miss what's next. Weed number 1, horsetail, the plant that outlived the dinosaurs. Save the best for last, and this one earns that spot completely. Horsetail's ancestors stretch back more than 300 million years, to the Carboniferous period, long before anything resembling a dinosaur ever walked the earth. Entire towering forests of horsetail relatives once dominated the landscape. What survives today is far smaller, a plant you'll usually spot growing in ditches, along riverbanks, or in the damp corner of a yard that never quite dries out. But it kept one trait fully intact from that ancient lineage, an almost unmatched concentration of silica, a mineral your body relies on to build and maintain collagen, the exact protein responsible for skin elasticity, strong nails, and healthy hair. Most people assume calcium is the only mineral that matters for strong bones and connective tissue as they get older. Silica rarely gets mentioned, mostly because so few common foods actually contain much of it. Horsetail is one of the very few exceptions, which is part of why researchers keep coming back to it. That silica content is so concentrated that early American settlers gave the plant a nickname you can still find in old botany books, scouring rush, because they used the rough, gritty stems to literally scrub pots, pans, and cookware clean before steel wool existed. Roman and Greek physicians, including Pliny the Elder and Galen, documented horsetail's use for wound healing and as a natural diuretic nearly 2,000 years ago, writing about it in texts that still survive. Modern researchers have picked up almost exactly where they left off, studying horsetail's silica content for its potential role in supporting bone density, hair strength, and connective tissue health, the very things that quietly decline as the years go by. Small human studies have looked at oral silica supplementation and reported improvements in hair thickness and nail strength after several months of consistent use, though researchers are careful to point out that larger trials are still needed before anyone calls this settled. Still, for a plant most people step over on a hiking trail without a second glance, that's a remarkable amount of attention from the scientific community. Steep 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried horsetail in hot water for 10 minutes to make a tea, but don't turn it into a daily habit for months on end without a break. Horsetail contains an enzyme called thiaminase that can deplete vitamin B1 with prolonged use, so cycle it, a few weeks on and then a pause, and check with your doctor first if you're pregnant, have kidney concerns, or take regular medication. 10 weeds. Every one of them growing in places people walk past without ever looking twice, along fences, in cracked driveways, at the edge of a garden bed where nobody bothers to look closely. But here's what almost nobody talks about. Knowing what a plant can do isn't the same as knowing how to use it correctly. Some of these lose most of their value the moment they're boiled at too high a temperature or steeped for far too long, breaking down the very compounds that made them worth picking in the first place. Some genuinely cancel each other out when combined carelessly, undoing the benefit of both plants at once instead of doubling it. And some get thrown away by pure mistake, because people misidentify the leaf, pull the wrong plant from the ground entirely, and toss out the exact one that actually mattered while keeping a harmless look-alike. There's also the timing question nobody talks about, because a weed picked at the wrong point in its growth cycle can carry almost none of the benefit of the same plant picked 2 weeks earlier. That part of the story, the mix-ups, the timing mistakes, and the exact combinations that make these weeds work even harder together than they do alone, is exactly where we're headed next, in 10 backyard weeds God designed to heal you instantly.